Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or also known as 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. You can learn more about the Three Principles Global Community at 3pgc.org. Today, we have Joe Bailey with us, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Joe has to say. Joe Bailey, MA, LP, is an author, seminar leader, consultant to organizations, public speaker, psychotherapist, and a licensed psychologist. His work has included co-founding the Minneapolis Institute of Mental Health, developing programs for healthcare provider wellness at the University of Minnesota, and numerous hospitals, including North Memorial Hospital, Minneapolis, East Lansing Health System, and Mayo Clinic, Arizona, treatment centers for addictions, Gulf Breeze Recovery, Meridian Systems, and Farnham Center, and numerous social service agencies. Joe has worked for over 40 years as a psychotherapist, trainer, administrator, supervisor, and consultant to clinics, hospitals, businesses, and other government groups. He is author of 6 books, including the bestseller, Slowing Down to the Speed of Life, with Dr. Richard Carlson, The Serenity Principle, Slowing Down to the Speed of Love, Fear-Proof Your Life, How to Thrive in a World Addicted to Fear, and his latest book that he contributed to, Creating a Marriage You Love, in 2010. He's currently working on a new book called Beyond Burnout, Resilience Revealed, with the foreword by Dr. Wyatt Decker, CEO of the Mayo Clinic in Arizona. You can learn more about Joe and his work at joebaileyhandassociates.com, and I will also put that website under the YouTube video. So for anybody watching on YouTube after the webinar is live, please scroll down to the Read More section, and you'll be able to find out how to contact Joe and read more about him. So with all that said, thank you so much for being here with us, Joe, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bonnie. I think this earlier technological difficulty was part of the stress test that you all went through, and now I have to ask you what your blood pressure is and your heart rate after going through that. Mine has gone up, has accelerated considerably, and Bonnie's has probably gone beyond that. So I thought it was a good introduction to what we're going to talk about today. And it's a delight to see all of you. There's some familiar faces out there, and dogs and cats and different things that I see in the background. So it's great to see all of those that I know and that I don't know, or maybe I just met at the conference. So this is a topic that's near and dear to me. And as Nancy or Bonnie knows, that we recently changed the title of the book I'm working on from The Resilient Healer to Beyond Burnout. And I just went on online yesterday to try to reserve that as a website and found out there's already a book called Beyond Burnout. So that won't be the title of my new book. But we'll come up with something better. So anyway, Beyond Burnout, though, is a great title. I wish I could have gotten it, because I love that, because it really speaks to how this paradigm shift that we call the three principle psychology really does so much more than help us to cope with stress or alleviate a little bit of it from time to time or take a break from it. This paradigm of the three principles, and I can speak from my own experience and from the experience of hundreds of other people who have realized this paradigm as an insight, that this really does take you beyond burnout. It doesn't mean that that you don't ever get stressed, or you don't ever lose your cool, or that you don't ever get affected by things in your world. But burnout actually, and I can say this wholeheartedly, could be a thing of the past for our professions, not only in healthcare and mental health and addictions and nursing and healthcare, but really in the world as a whole. That burnout is truly an epidemic. And in preparing to write this book, I've I don't need to bore you with a lot of statistics other than to say this is really at an epidemic rate. When I started with Mayo Clinic 5 years ago, the rate for physician burnout was 34%. Then it spiked to 43%, and last year it spiked to 54%. There were over 400 physician suicides last year. And this is just in the medical physician field. If you look at nursing statistics, both in the U.S. and around the world, the statistics are very similar for all helping professions. And I don't know the statistics on the general public, but I imagine it's very similar to that for moms and dads and caregivers and people of all walks of life are experiencing this increasing levels of stress chronically, which is what we call burnout. Because when you experience stress over a long period of time, you start to shut down. People get depressed. They start to turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like alcohol and drugs, distractedness. They get on the treadmill and they run faster. They become workaholics. They get exhausted. They can't sleep at night. They can't turn their brain off. When that happens over a long period of time, we burn out. So let me just say a little bit about myself, because what got really hooked me, what got me to my first Sydney Bank seminar back in 1980, 35 years ago, was the fact that I was burned out. And what I mean by that is that I was starting to be very cynical about my work. Does this really help anybody? I started to be dreading going to work. It was difficult some days to walk up those stairs and see another 6 clients or 7 clients in my private practice. I was fantasizing about changing to another career. There's got to be something better than this. Maybe I could become an outdoor specialist and work in the wilderness or forestry or something. And so I was, even though I had many, many coping mechanisms, I meditated every day. I had a support group for other therapists and I was in an Al-Anon group, a men's group. I jogged 5 miles every day to relieve my stress, even though I had, and was actually teaching seminars on stress prevention and reduction by teaching a variety of techniques that were very popular seminars, by the way, because I wasn't the only one. But it was a bit like the blind leading the blind. And what blinded me was my misunderstanding of the very nature of stress. That's what it really was. It wasn't my job. It wasn't all the things I had to do. It wasn't how important I thought I was or what I was doing was. It was this invisible, powerful, up and running operating system that we're all part of, the human mind, that once understood that I was talking to a client yesterday, and he said, he came up with this term. He says, "Oh, this is the reality law. This is the law of reality." I said, "That's it." Because it always looked to me like my reality was coming from out there. And out there, by out there, I don't mean just my physical surroundings, be it traffic or being at work with a difficult client, or but also out there in terms of remembering something from my past that was stressful, or projecting into the future about something that might happen, or the unknown, or what if this and what if that. So my mind was constantly creating an experience, sometimes pleasant and hopeful and joyful, sometimes stressful, anguished, angry, but I didn't know I was creating that. I thought that was coming from just a sensory perception of reality. I was just perceiving reality. And so when I met Sid Banks, again, I accumulated a lot of techniques, a lot of investment in those techniques. a career based on selling those techniques and teaching these techniques of coping with stress to many people, and especially people in recovery, because people in recovery from addictions have a lot of stress and depression. And so they love hearing, tell me what to do, Joe. Tell me what I can do every day to keep myself from experiencing this. And I would gladly do that. And come on back next week for more, the latest. So when I met Sid and was struck like lightning by what he was saying, because it completely turned my world upside down and inside out, it completely shattered my belief system. The thoughts that I had constructed about reality and how to cope with the reality I had created. When Sid said, you're living in a thought-created world of your own creation, and everyone is living and only ever experiencing the world of their own thinking. There is no reality but the thoughts that we create in the moment. But that was the very nature of reality, was this inner workings of mind, thought, and consciousness behind the scenes creating my experience. So that was the truth. And when I heard it, it struck a powerful resonance in my core, because I had been looking for this my whole life, knowingly at times and unknowingly most of the time. I was looking for what Sid was pointing to. And when I heard it, it struck that chord of truthiness. I love Stephen Colbert's word, truthiness. It struck that chord for me, and I knew I'd found what I was looking for. Meanwhile, up in the attic, my thought system was having conniptions, because what about all those seminars I've given? How am I going to make a living? And if I can't do what I've been doing, that makes everything obsolete. And God, I've wasted a lot of time. And why didn't someone tell me this earlier? Oh, I feel so stupid, that I didn't see this myself. And all those thoughts were just doing cartwheels in my brain about what Sid was saying. So then my ego would shoot up and say, yeah, but what about this? And well, who is this guy to tell me? He's just a welder with a 9th grade education. How can he know what I didn't know anything about Sid. I didn't have any, I was not revering him as some wise master. He was just somebody Keith recommended that I listened to. So when he spoke with such authority and certainty, like none I'd ever heard before, my skeptic really got heightened, turned on. And I didn't want to believe what I was hearing, but at the same time, this resonance of truth hit me like a ton of bricks. So for a little while, I let go of the thought system of everything I created and just had a wonderful week. And Karen Miller was there. Met Karen, who's on this show right now. I'd never been around people that were happier, more themselves, more joyful. And it was just like in a bath. I was just enjoying every moment of it. And then I went back to my private practice on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, whenever it was. And as I was driving to work, my stress started coming back. I could feel my shoulders coming up around my ears and worrying about the day and this client and that client. And oh, God, I'm really backed up now. I lost all that money because I wasn't working. And, all the old patterns of thought came rushing back in. And after about 5 minutes of this and getting pretty stressed out, the insight that I had on that weekend came back to me. And it just gently tapped on my shoulder and said, you're just creating this with your thinking. And like magic, I took a deep breath without doing progressive relaxation techniques or meditation techniques. And I just took a deep breath and my body relaxed. My head cleared. And the day looked completely different to me as I went forward. And that was the beginning of the end of my burnout. string together hundreds of insights like that one, and you have a person who's happy as a clam doing what he always wanted to do again, and had a jump start for my profession. Had no idea how to do therapy anymore. I was clueless, but it didn't matter because the results I was getting were way better than I was getting when I thought I knew what I was doing. Which is pretty amazing, isn't it? It was like, yeah, I had no clue what I was doing. My clients were getting better and saying, geez, why didn't you tell me this before? And I'm going, wow, maybe there is some truth to this. If they all think so, they weren't even there must be something to this. I was getting the results that I always hoped for. But again, I was skeptical. I didn't think this would last. Maybe it was just a placebo effect, a flight into health, all the terms that we have in psychology for things that we can't explain. And so I just would kind of at times try to go back and do the old way of counseling, which felt like fingernails on the blackboard. I couldn't do it anymore. And so I would go back to teaching them about what I was beginning to start to see about thought in this new paradigm that we now call the three principles psychology. And when I did, they would respond, and pretty soon my clients got well and they referred other people. My practice grew. I ended up having to start a clinic because I couldn't see all the clients I was getting, and on and on. And so after a while, a few years, really just a few months, Christine Heath and I, we started supervising other therapists because they were seeing the results we were getting and they wanted to know what we were learning. And so we started training other people. But you know what they really wanted? They looked at me and they said, "What are you smoking, Bailey? You look so happy. What's up with you? What happened to you?" They were seeing that I was present in a way I had never been. I was just like Mr. Preoccupied, stressed out psychologist, and all of a sudden I was happy, lighthearted, more present, listened better. And they thought, what's up with him? Must have found Jesus or something. They didn't know what to put it into. And so after a while, we started training people. And we started a clinic, and that took a few years to get that up and running. But after a while, I could see, boy, we need to get this out to the profession. We need to get this out to beyond just our clients. We need to. This is a big deal. This is for everybody. So I started getting asked to speak at chemical dependency treatment centers and conferences, or give talks at schools, or it just kind of evolved organically over time that more and more people were interested in bringing these principles to their employees, their coworkers, themselves. And so I started to get really interested in the implications that if people aren't burnt out anymore, if they're resilient performance levels, what does that do to their impact as physicians, therapists, nurses, store clerks, managers, CEOs, whatever the role might be? That when people got what I got, which was seeing that I was the creator of my experience, and just seeing that in the moment repeatedly lowered my stress, allowed me to be more comfortable in my own skin. I had better thinking, more insights, more clarity, and that started happening with a lot of these other people. So I guess it was back in maybe the early 90s that I thought, okay, we need to really take this out in the world more, not just focus on our clients and occasionally giving a talk somewhere. And so I was asked with Dick and Bettinger, I think was one of the other teachers. We went to East Lansing, Michigan. We work with a hospital system there with Mark Madigan and a few other people who invited us in, and we began training the medical staff at the hospital. And it really helped them a lot with turnover of their staff, teamwork, leadership, medical mistakes. You know, there was just all kinds of repercussions of the staff regaining their own mental health, their own resilience. And a couple of years later, after I wrote Slowing Down the Speed of Life, I was asked by a local hospital here in Minneapolis called North Memorial to develop a program that would transform their culture, because they had been a smaller hospital, and their motto was, because we care. And they had a lot of genuine caring, and people loved that, were very loyal to this hospital, but that was eroding over time as the HMOs came in, health maintenance organizations. It was all about costs and cost containment and cutting staff and increased production and more paperwork, and pretty soon people were at each other's throat at work. You know, the patients got lost in the shuffle. The nurses and doctors and other staff the turnover was incredible. They were quitting their jobs a lot. There was a lot of medical complaints, lawsuits. So they brought me in and they hired me for 4 years. He said, we'll give you 4 years to turn the culture around, which was pretty amazing. I never had an opportunity like that. So I just took kind of mostly nurses, department by department, and did like 4-day training programs, pretty much going through the entire hospital, starting with the senior management team. And it was the CEO who was Mr. Scrooge. The guy was like this, the bean counter guy that everybody hated, who just, after the first day of the first seminar, he went home and he had a conversation with his wife, which he hadn't had in years. They were living parallel careers. She was a lawyer, he was the CEO. They were both really overly involved in their careers. Their relationship was going down the tubes. And that night, after the first seminar, he came home and he actually listened to his wife for the first time in years about her day, and she just thought, what happened to you? Why are you listening to me like that? This is making me uncomfortable, but I like it. And so he came back the next day and talked to the other management team. There were about 20 of them there, and he told them what happened. Oh, that was a nice kiss for Patty. And he looked like a different guy, and they couldn't believe the words that were coming out of the bean counter's mouth, you know, about the importance of listening and relationships. And he decided that he was going to just start listening to his employees and hearing what they had to say. And every week he went to a different department and he just had listening sessions with the staff and asked them to tell me what you're doing that you're proud of, and tell me what you're doing that you're struggling with, and how can I help? That's all he did. Mostly listened. Over time, it just transformed the culture to a more relaxed, engaged, vibrant, compassionate, and caring hospital like it once was. So that was kind of my first experience working with a healthcare system. It was very rewarding. And that later led, the head nurse knew the head of the Center for Spirituality and Healing at the University of Minnesota Medical School. And they were going to start a program for healthcare professionals because they saw the burnout problem. And so they wanted to develop a program on resilience called the Inner Life of Healers. So me, along with 2 other people, started this program for physicians, nurses, psychologists, social workers, pharmacists, medical students, nursing students. It was, we just did seminars and retreats and classes in the medical school on, oh, somebody's off. Somebody's mute is off. And that was really helpful, but it was a mixed paradigm because, we had, who's the mindfulness guy? John Cabot-Zinn was one of our consultants. And there were a few other kind of heavy hitters in the wellness field who were designing our program. So there was the three principles and there was all these other things. So the effects of what I was saying were diluted to a degree, but enough that it really got some attention. It was getting some really good results. And then at some point, at one point, I got a call, and I could see that, that was a referral from Mavis Karn, my coworker, and to work with a physician from Mayo Clinic, and who was going through challenges with his work and his relationships, and was pretty burned out. And so I did an intensive with him, and he just popped. He was one of those popcorn kernels that just pops, the first one to pop in the pan, kind of guy. He was very open and just really ready to hear something. He was pretty desperate, but also really open and very bright individual. And so his life really turned around. His marriage turned around. His stress levels went down. And I'm hoping I can show you a video of him during this seminar, talking about what happened with him. But he saw that this was really valuable. And so within 3 months, coincidentally, he was asked to apply for the CEO position of Mayo, Arizona. This is kind of the dumb luck thing that happens in the principles, that you get all of these, where did that come from, So I coach him through the interviewing process, and he wins it hands down. They hire him, and 2 months later, the whole family's moved to Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, and he's in his new role as CEO, and I'm his executive coach. So we work together, quite a bit, at least monthly, and I'd go down quarterly and spend a day with him. And so we had a pretty intensive coaching experience that first year, because he walked into a tough role. The guy who he replaced was very loved. He was seen as the spy from Mayo headquarters coming down to change their culture. So they were very suspicious of him. But he was very wise, and he realized that he wasn't going to do anything but really just engage with his staff, walk the talk, be present with his staff. And he was pretty low-key. And but they saw his calm demeanor. They heard his wisdom. He was the wise person in the room when everybody else was at each other. He would calmly say something that would pull it all together. And so his leadership emerged from his understanding. Does that make sense? Like his ability to lead came from that wisdom of the inside out. He was not reactive. He didn't take things personally. He could see that his experience was coming from his thinking if he did get stressed out or upset or take something personally. So he was able to keep his bearings in a very difficult, very challenging position. And that impacted his senior team to the point where he said, I remember we were walking up a mountain, which we often did. We'd walk around the mountains around Phoenix and do our coaching sessions. And he said, I really want to bring this to all my employees. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to bring this to all my employees. This has helped me more than anything I've ever learned. It helped me learn more about being a leader than my MBA I got at Northwestern University. hands down, this was way more powerful for me, for decision making, for clear thinking, for being able to have a vision. All the principles have allowed me, have brought out of me this leader. So I want everybody to have this. And so we were going to at first take it into the safety team, and then we were going to take it into their education department where they do simulations, which was kind of the educational department. They have all these robots. I mean, Mayo is unbelievable. It's just like Disney World. So they have a whole center that's just to train nurses and doctors with robots that are the dummy patients and simulate different illnesses, and then how do they work with each other as a team. And so we thought about that. And then 4 years ago, a study came out that showed the spike in physician burnout. And he says, that's our entry point. We're going to work with the physicians. And so, because it was an epidemic, it was a crisis point. So we started with the senior leadership team. Keith Blevins and I did that together. And it was successful. They weren't all on board. I'll tell you that right now. There was some resistance from people, but they looked at Wyatt, Dr. Decker, and they would say, well, this guy, whatever he's having, I'll at least be open to it because it certainly seems to have helped him. I'll have what he's having, kind of a thing. And so we did a 4-day initial retreat with coaching and video sessions. We kind of threw everything we could at them. And a significant number of the leaders really had a paradigm shift. They got it. They got that their experience was coming from the inside out. It wasn't just another concept or another idea or another approach. They saw the implications of this for their own life and for the people around them. And so the next step, we did a pilot program, which was a 2-year program, 4 programs, where we did a 2-day seminar, and I did the seminar part. Keith and I did the coaching afterward with each person that went through it. And then we had a follow-up session 4 months later, where we all got back together again and debriefed what they had learned. And that was it. It was just 2 days, 3 coaching sessions, a 4-hour aftercare thing. And from that, we got extraordinary results, like a 75% reduction or increased ability to rebound from adversity, a 74% decrease in ruminating thoughts. I mean, think of all of the thinking that was taken away from these people. And the thing they loved about it was that they didn't have to do anything in addition to their already busy job. They just had to understand how it worked, how reality was actually being created from the inside out. And every other course that they'd gotten at Mayo was about learning another technique, mindfulness, heart math, strategic planning courses. You know, I mean, there's a million consultants that come through Mayo. What they loved about this most was that it just reminded them of what resilience was already within them. It put a box around the moments that they had been resilient, their patients had been resilient, their coworkers had been resilient, their kids had been resilient. And it helped them understand how that was happening. What was the science behind those resilient moments? And the 3 principles is what explained it perfectly. And so we've completed that research. And now I'm starting to, we'll be working with another division starting in 2 weeks. And we'll be doing more programs next year, but it's really quite exciting that we were able to do a controlled study of this. Dr. Decker, the CEO, Dr. Rockala, who's head of liver transplant for Mayo, myself and Keith Blevins are going to write a journal article in a medical journal going over the findings. So That's why I'm not sharing all the findings with you, because we want to publish it first. But anyway, so that's kind of, I've spoken already over 40 minutes, sorry. Kind of long-winded, aren't I? But I'd love to hear your questions, your comments, and just throw it out to the group now.
So I just want to remind everyone that you can unmute yourself by clicking the microphone in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And if for some reason you can't, if you raise your hand, I'll be able to unmute you.
Anybody? I'm not hearing anybody.
Joe,
Oh,
I have
hi.
a question. This is Fiona. How are you?
Oh, hi, Fiona. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Are you in Sweden or Saudi Arabia? Where are you?
I'm in Saudi.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah. I'm experiencing an interesting time in my own hospital organization, and there's a potential for me to have this conversation with the CEO. However, the CEO of my organization would be considered very much a traditionalist, in the sense of, bring in another leadership team with techniques to solve what is a cultural problem. I was just curious as to how you would suggest that I would approach such a practical topic, but from the perspective of wanting to bring the principles into an organization, because it's not very tangible to have a conversation about it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think is that the whole question, Fiona?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like I was, again, like I kind of hit the lottery here with Wyatt, and the way it happened was very circumstantial and coincidental and all that, so that by having the person who's in the primary leadership role having a shift himself, it really made this possible. So, but the CEO of Mayo in general, the top CEO, has no interest in this whatsoever. He's just, this is kind of happening under the radar in a sense, but they're aware of it. And they also have some of the top experts in the world on burnout and burnout prevention at Mayo in Rochester. So they think they've already got this nailed. So in a way, we're kind of up against the same thing, but the results of just doing this pilot, the word starts to organically get out. People start talking. And so what I would recommend, Fiona, is, I don't know how you would convince someone like him to completely bring in this whole new thing, but you might start with a pilot program. Would you be willing to try something they used at Mayo Clinic, for example, that was very successful with a group of people who went through this program? And rather than trying to get the whole organization on board, start with a smaller place so that so they can see what this looks like. They can get a feel for the results of it. Because if you just talk about it, it's so theoretical and obtuse and outside of the existing paradigm that people look at you like you're from Mars. So it has to come from seeing someone else shift or having a shift yourself. Like what we found, we had waiting lists for people coming into the next seminar and the next seminar because the word got out. Their boss, their coworker, someone they were friends with in the organization had gone to it and said, "This really changed my life. This really, it seems so simple. I don't even know how to talk about it, but just go to the seminar. It really made a difference." And, I just feel like I have more time than I used to have before. without getting any more hours in the day. It feels like there's more time in my life. It feels like I'm much more efficient. I manage my time better. I relax at night. I'm more present with my family. You know, all of these little stories in the lunchroom, in the hallway, in the operating room that were little conversations multiply, and a critical mass is reached. So my advice is really start small. I mean, it's already started with you, Fiona, because of who you are and your position in the hospital. But they might just think you're a special person, like they thought of Wyatt. They thought, oh, Wyatt's just a real gifted leader. And then he said, look, before I knew these principles that you're going to learn in the seminar, I was really stressed out. I was almost burned out. And my ability to keep all these silos in my life separated so I didn't go crazy was really a challenge. I found a way to see my life that keeps me from juggling all the balls. And now I show up and I do whatever I do in the moment. So those little conversations are your marketing department. And my advice is start small, be experimental, and measure the results. Document your results. Does that answer your question? I can't hear you now. You're still muted.
Sorry, Joe. Thank you. No, that's great. I think that the pilot is a great idea. And I think because we have a research university on site here, that we could measure the results as well. And that would be really useful.
Yeah, it's real hard to like Wyatt's vision is this will change all of healthcare. And I'll show you a video of him talking about that. But first he wants to change Mayo. He wants to bring this to Mayo Clinic. And he may well do that. He's that kind of person that gets things done, knows how to very patiently trust the timing, not push it. You can't push this. He said, I want this to be pulled by the employees. And he says, I'm waiting for a standard bearer who's been through the program to take the banner and run with it. And now that's happened. And he has now given him part of his full-time job to be devoted to the resiliency program and taken away a couple of his other responsibilities. And he said, this is what I want to do with the rest of my career, is get this to medical schools, get this all to all of Mayo. So this guy is all charged up, and he's at the end of his career. He's in his early 70s, but so that took 4 years, to get there,
Yeah.
but be patient.
Okay. Super. Thanks, Joe. Yeah. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Fiona. Who else has a question or a comment?
We have someone who wrote in that she's in a noisy place, and so asked me to ask the question. And this is from Haya, who first wanted to say how much they appreciate the hours of work and webinars, and secondly, says, I'm a hospice social worker and would love to hear how you might speak to the 3 Ps and working on interdisciplinary teams. And if you have any journal articles that have been published already, please let me know. Looking forward to the one you are working on. So, would you read that?
Did I read that? Oh, it's on the chat thing here. Okay.
I don't think you can see it, but I'd be
no, I can't.
Say it again.
Okay.
if you would like me to.
Yeah, not a whole lot's been written. I've been writing for 3 years on this book, so I've written a lot about it, but none of it's published yet. And so I'm not. Maybe someone else is aware of something, but I do know that what I'm going to be doing now is working with an entire department, transplant division, at Mayo with the whole staff. So that'll be different than the pilot was people coming in from all different departments, mostly doctors, but some nurses and administrators. So this will be seeing the effects on a team and the interdisciplinary team. So I'll look forward to sharing that at some point and hopefully put that in the book.
So this is the definition that we gave of resilience. I'm going to just go through a few of the slides here just to kind of introduce this. So we said resilience is not being bound by circumstances or the past. So resilience is something that is, a second here. It's something that's a completely natural part of life. It's built into us. There's nothing that you need to put in you to be resilient. Resilience is as natural as breathing or your heart beating. And we've all witnessed that resilience in ourselves and other people, on the news and movies and stories that we've seen where people surprisingly become resilient. And I'll often ask the participants to reflect on times in their life when they've been surprisingly resilient in difficult circumstances, or someone, a patient that they had, or a family member, or a coworker that inspired them through their acts of resilience, so that people start to see that this is normal, natural, and it's all around us. So that's what we're really trying to get across to people. First of all, it's not anything you have to do. It's not anything that you have to add to your life. It's something that's already there. So it's not a doing or an accomplishment. You don't get extra credit for being resilient. It's humbling, actually, when you are resilient, because you feel blessed, you feel lucky. It's not something we add to, but it's really more of a subtraction of our thinking. So it's not thinking in a particular way or controlling our thinking. It's what's left when our insecure, outside-in thinking begins to fall away through understanding how the mind actually is creating reality. And the last point we make is that we do not ever really, you don't really have control over resilience. It's not something that you can make happen, but it's like floating in the water. You naturally float because you're more buoyant than the water. But if you try to float, like I did when I first learned to swim, I sank like a rock. And it's like that with resilience. Trying to be resilient engages the thought, the intellect, and it blocks this natural flow of what's left when thinking falls away, which is resilience. So I'll take another question, and then maybe I can talk a little bit more about kind of the current paradigm of stress and where we got it wrong, and how that all the scientific research now is really pointing to the three principles. It's fascinating when you delve into the work on trauma, the work on stress, the work on resiliency. You see all of these channels of research are really pointing to that what's creating the resilient child, what's creating the trauma or the degree of trauma in some people and not in others, is not the degree of the trauma or the degree of the difficult family situation, but the way a person perceives it. In other words, the way they think about the trauma. So that there's trauma thinking. Trauma-inducing thinking is kind of what the researchers are calling it. So, of course, we would just see that that's just thought in the moment. That depending on how you see something, which of course we don't have control over the thoughts that come in our mind. But when we realize that it's thought rather than coming from the trauma, it does something for us and it clears our mind. It removes the burdening thinking that may be habitual by awareness, by consciousness coming into being. We realize it's my thinking that's creating this experience, not what that person's doing to me, not what's happening outside. And so researchers are showing that some people seem to do that more than others. Why is that? And many, like at Columbia University, Bonamo is talking about the perceived traumatic event or potential traumatic event rather than seeing it as a traumatic event. So he's seeing that the way we experience trauma, stress, anything in our life comes from thinking in the moment. So this is the argument in a sense that I'm building in my book is how the research is really pointing to the three principles. So any comments, questions? Yeah, Bob.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for this. This is absolutely wonderful. What I was wondering is, in your program, is there a way to tell how much of the difference in these people's lives is from presenting the program and how much is from like the individual coaching when you're getting together with them?
Well,
I'm sure it's both, but you know.
The coaching was extremely important. The seminar kind of got people in the ballpark, but it was the follow through in the coaching when the rubber met the road, you know, when they got to re-experience the same situation with a new understanding that they realized the power of their thinking to create the experience. So it started to unfold after the seminar. So the coaching was, we found that people who didn't get any coaching, their results went way down. People who had at least 1 or 2 or 3 sessions, ideally, got more incrementally more out of the program. So the coaching was extremely important. Good question, Bob. Thanks.
Thank you. So you're kind of in a way going from the general where you're teaching this whole thing to the specific where you're getting into individuals' questions and things.
Yeah, and also during the classroom, it was a combination of teaching about the paradigm, and we taught it as a scientific single paradigm. So we had a lot of researchers, Mayo Clinic, they're all researchers, they're all educators, as well as physicians and practitioners. So we talked to that part of them. We explained this as a scientific paradigm shift. And so that was part of the seminar. Part of the seminar was we had small groups. We'd break them into groups of 6 to 8, and then we'd have a facilitator from someone who'd already been through the program would facilitate the small group. So those breakouts, that's where things really came to life for people, because the facilitator got to share and respond to their questions, who was one of them, not this guy from outside, this psychologist, what do they know, you know, kind of guy. It was one of their people validating how this had helped them. And then we showed videos like the one I just showed to you throughout the seminar. I have many, many interviews with lots of people. And we would show those during the seminar because they could see people that they knew who had been through the program and how it benefited them. So it was a combination of lecture, small group, videos, coaching sessions, and then a lot, they got together on their own too, you know, and talked with each other about this. So there was that.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Sure does. Thank you very much.
And Joe, I'm going to unmute someone on an iPhone. The only name I have is iPhone. So if that's you and you had your hand raised, you're unmuted now. Hello?
Hi.
Anybody, somebody on the iPhone who had their hand raised?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is me. I raised my hand basically saying that I wanted you to go to, I wanted to stay with you for an hour and a half, Joe. I didn't have a specific question, but now that I'm speaking with you, you and I met at the conference, and my name is Joel Peters. And
Oh,
hey,
hi, Joel.
Hi.
Hey.
I guess a question I have that is more organizational. Do you see this going to the other Mayo clinics? The training, the coaching, the understanding?
Well, I think it has the potential to, over time, we've got only 5,000 people on the staff at Mayo, Arizona, which is, significant, but it's compared to the other institution in Rochester, which is 60,000 employees, is huge. So I kind of like working with a smaller organization where we can show results more. So once we get a good track record, get a couple of articles written, we have a more significant track record. We're kind of just patiently moving along slowly here. We're not trying to push this. So, but I think it will eventually, because the need is so great, the burnout level, the attrition of physicians now. At Mayo Clinic, if one physician quits for whatever reason, retirement, or they're burned out because they can't take it anymore, it costs Mayo Clinic $1 million to replace that person. So this program's really cheap compared to the cost of losing one person.
It's amazing.
So I'm optimistic about that.
I mean, yes, amazing how the world will change as this. Just that very, when the critical mass reaches the point in this country or on earth, however we want to say it, to where more people see the inside out approach and the principles being the source of our experience. It's amazing. It's amazing what will change and how much will save all the energy that's spent in,
needless thinking,
needless thinking, and all the harmful doing that occurs. So, thanks.
What I see, Joel, is that so much of what stress really is just unnecessary thinking. Because when we do the right amount of thinking in the moment to address the issue, it doesn't feel stressful. It's when we overthink anything that we create what we call stress. It's inappropriate, ineffectual, unnecessary thinking is what stress is. In working with smaller organizations than Mayo, like treatment centers, burnout is obsolete. It doesn't exist anymore. Staff doesn't burn out. That's under the principles. It doesn't mean they don't get stressed at times. Sometimes there's really difficult clients in the treatment center, and it can be really challenging. And sometimes you're overworked and you haven't had enough sleep and blah blah blah. Knowing the principles doesn't take away stress, and it doesn't take away emotions. You have the whole range of emotions that you had before you learned the principles. It's just that they don't have as long a shelf life. You don't keep ruminating and repeating the same thought over and over again. So it's the redundant thinking that's the creator of mental illness. And so you can have stress, and then so what? Or grief or sadness or anger or whatever emotion. And once you see the connection between your thinking and the feeling, you start, you evolve out of that. You start to have insight, or you get some distance from it. You have some perspective on your emotion. So the principles they give us shock absorbers in going through life. There's still bumps in the road, but the paradigm of the three principles gives us an understanding that takes the suffering out of pain. It takes the burnout out of stress. It takes the illness out of an ill thought. It's just it doesn't have legs when you have understanding. So I'd like to show one more video with you guys, if you can just stay with me for a minute. And this is one that Dr. Decker made recently, Chantal Burns from England interviewed he and I asked him the question at the end of our interview, why, given what you know about the three principles and how they've helped you and your organization, how do you see this helping healthcare and beyond? And so, is it all right if I just show this video? I'm going to do another screen share here.
Yep.
Okay. You see that?
I can see it. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to turn it on now.
Okay, great.
Just on healthcare for a minute, we have the potential to redefine the entire equation. So again, mostly in the US, but you can all think of your respective countries. Healthcare is not healthcare, it's sick care. We're taking care of people who are sick. And if you ask them what they want, well, most people who are really sick wish they had never gotten sick. So what if we, whether it's Mayo Clinic or beyond, begin changing the conversation and focusing on what is true health care and wellness, and why not put all the brilliant minds that are figuring out the next treatment for cancer, which is incredibly exciting and incredibly important, but what if we're also thinking about how to prevent cancer? And what if we're thinking about how to avoid needing that major surgery, the next liver transplant, the kinds of things that we're very renowned for at the Mayo Clinic? Those are wonderful and important advances, but we're envisioning a place where people are able to bring their best selves to the workplace and think innovatively and differently about all sorts of problems. And we've already seen that the cost of healthcare can drop without lowering and, in fact, increasing the quality of healthcare. So, Joe, to your point, I mean, I think that there's this opportunity to have this tremendous transformation of healthcare. So the transformation, sort of in my domain, I'm saying, how can we transform the Mayo Clinic? How can we transform healthcare? And then how in each of our domains do we help to make society a place where there is less bitterness, less anger, less frustration, less cynicism, and more focus on solutions to societal problems. And we have a tremendous relationship with a whole host of universities, including Karolinska University, University of Minnesota, Arizona State University, where we want to have those conversations. We want to work in the biggest playing fields that are available to say, how do we make the world a better place? And to me, the principles are going to need to be a significant part of that solution. Sometimes it's these technical innovations, but to get to those technical innovations, we have to be at a place where we're not distracted, where we're able to bring our best thinking to the problems that we all face, whether it's in a classroom, in a hospital bed, in an emergency department, or in society. So, I do think this is an incredibly exciting time.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on that? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Zia. He's got his hand up.
Hi, I just
Hi.
wanted to, can we get access to those videos and can we share them with other people if we wish?
Probably not in general. Like if there's a specific organization that I can get permission, but I can't just give blanket permission for people to use it at this point. I'd love to, believe me, because they're very helpful and I appreciate you asking. But when the book I'm writing is going to have the videos embedded in it so that when you read a story, you can click on it with your iPhone and you'll be able to see the video. That's the hope anyway. We'll see how that happens. But the technology is there to do that. So Dr. Keith Blevins and I are going to, and Val Monroe are going to do a 4-day program in April that I'm going to put up on the Three Principles Global website. That'll be an in-depth training on how we bring this into an organization like Mayo, and what the paradigm is, what we teach, it's much more in depth than this little, hour and 15-minute talk I gave you. So if people are interested in that, you can go to my website and go under resources and find out about that, or we'll put it on the Three Principles Global website to let people know. I think Fiona's signed up for that already, if I remember. So a few people are already signed up for it, and it'll be in April in La Conner, which is the peak of the Tulip Festival. So it's a very pretty time to be there. Anybody else have any questions?
There is one question that came in again from Haya. I'll read it to you. Can you hear me okay, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay. Haya is asking if you could talk about how the feeling of our thinking, let me see if I can read this. How the feeling...
I can read it.
Oh, you can see that, okay.
Yeah. How you can talk about how the feeling our thinking brings can give us a clue about credible versus possibly not credible thinking coming through in the moment. That's a great question. So every feeling, every thought creates a sensation. All right. So if you have an angry thought, that as a physical sensation, and it feels very different than lightheartedness, right? So feelings and thought are one thing. The feeling is the physical expression of thought in the moment. So when you get a feeling, like when you're just living your life and you're in a healthy physical state, you don't notice your body very much, do you? You're just kind of, you're breathing, and, your respiration's fine, and you're not too hot or too cold. You got enough energy. You don't even notice your body. It's only when your body goes out of balance and you are short of breath or overheated or hungry or tired or you notice it, and you just don't have to figure out why or anything. You just notice it and you make adjustments. Well, the same thing is true psychologically. The mind and the body are one. And so we experience thought in the body, and it's like an alert system. When we're ruminating, for example, what do you feel like when you're ruminating? You get stressed. Your forehead wrinkles up. You feel a tightness. There's all kinds of people feel that differently, but it's not lighthearted, I'll tell you that. You don't feel lighthearted. So when the squeaky wheel starts to turn, it gets your attention. Now, you don't want to go into analyzing, well, what am I thinking about that's creating this? That would be way too much. You don't want to analyze your thoughts or try to figure out why you're feeling what you're feeling. That would take you into the intellect and back into the deeper outside-in thinking. But when you simply recognize, you just become aware that you're thinking, duh, I'm having a nightmare. I'm having a daymare. When you feel that, like Jorge Aracala in the last video said, it's not like something you do. It's not like something that you have to think or make happen. It just simply by being aware of where your experience is coming from, it does something for you. It clears your mind and makes room for insight to happen. Now, it doesn't always happen, but it's being aware that you're thinking, sometimes brought to awareness by a feeling, an emotion, a sensation, sometimes brought to awareness by realizing that everybody you're talking to that way is looking at you like, what's the matter with you? We recognize it in different ways. But the moment we realize that we're creating an inside-out experience of our thinking in the moment, it does something for us that awakens this resilience. this clarity, this moment of truth, moment of consciousness, moment of, I don't even want to put too many labels on it. It's just an awareness that simply being aware that you're thinking is really enough to clear your mind. It doesn't always clear immediately, but being, it's kind of like having a snorkel. When you're underwater, you don't take any, you can still breathe because you got a snorkel up there. So your awareness in a way helps you going through a low mood or upset feeling or getting caught up in your thinking. I know it's my thinking, but I'm still feeling it, So just being aware that it's coming from within rather than blaming and giving the power to the outside helps you move in the direction of resilience or innate health or balance. So that's how I'd answer that. So I think we're at the end of our road here.
Shall we?
Thank you very much. This was fun.
Yeah, and I'm just going to do a last call. Is there anyone else that has something burning to say?
I have. Hello?
Yes?
Michelle.
Hi, Joel. I just have 2 comments. Just while we were talking, I just seen something about, I've been having a sugar addiction for many years since I was a child. And I've been trying to give up a sugar, like, I guess 1,000 times, or I don't know, on and on all the time, and I can see now it's kind of been like a fight for me, And what I've been seeing now where you were just talking, it's kind of hard to describe, but like I see myself as a sugar addict. And then I start to behave like that. Because sometimes there are days where I just say, oh, well, it's okay. I'm just not going to have sugar today. I'm fine, right? But like just recently for a few days, I've been eating so much sugar because I've been telling myself, I've been seeing myself as a sugar addict. Yeah. And it's so simple, but I just kind of saw it, that what we it's like what we see, it's what we get.
Yeah.
I don't know if this makes sense, but just thanks.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah. Yeah, when we label ourselves or diagnose ourselves, we put ourselves in a box, and then we create a thought system about ourselves. This is what we all do as human beings. And if you believe something to be true, you're using the power of thought innocently to recreate that over and over and over again. So that's how addiction works. You think you take on that identity as a sugar addict or alcoholic or drug addict or sex addict or 3PG webinar addict. That's a good. But whatever your addiction is, then it's on your mind all the time. You're either thinking about it or trying not to think about it, or thinking about how much you've been thinking about it, or trying to control your thought about it. And so you create more and more and more thought about your thought, and you just get caught in that. But when you just see the simplicity of the paradigm, which is really realizing that you're always living in the thinking of you're always living in the feeling of your thinking in this moment. When you see that, I'm just feeling my thinking right now, it removes a lot of that unnecessary analysis paralysis, and which tends to keep us outside in longer. And the simple, gentle awareness, not always, but often will help us just naturally make that shift to moment of clarity, inner peace. These are some of the implications of seeing your thinking in the moment, as you do tend to be more relaxed, less on your mind, have more creative, insightful thinking. But their implications, there's not something that you have to do. It's something that is already built into you, Michelle. You already know how to eat, and you already know how to eat in a balanced way. You just have a lot of habits that have covered that up, that natural not knowing. And that's
also fixing things. I really want to fix it all the time, you know. I just really want to fix it, you know, like this is the problem I have and I keep wanting to fix it, you know.
Yeah. Well, it ain't broken, so don't fix it.
Thanks so much.
That's one of the biggest gifts Sydney Banks gave to the world. We're already healthy. We're already whole. We're already complete. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to change. We're already complete. That's the biggest gift. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I hope wherever you are, maybe you don't celebrate Thanksgiving where you live, but we do here in the States. So from the United States, we all wish you a happy Thanksgiving.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joe, for this wonderful, helpful, and very hopeful talk. It was really great. I'm going to post your website on the bottom of the YouTube video, and I was just looking as we were speaking. There is a place to sign up. So if you want to keep in touch and make sure that you know when Joe's new book comes out, you know, you can go there.
And just my mailing list also on the website.
Yeah. And just want to tell everybody that December 8th is the next webinar with Kara Stambeck of Pransky and Associates. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.